Erik Gronwall's decision to leave Skid Row in 2024 was, according to him, driven by health concerns with Skid Row's busy touring schedule. But Erik is out now playing shows with Michael Schenker and doing all this other stuff. So, is Erik Gronwall a fucking hypocrite? Tonight on The Guru Investigates.
The hair metal guru from Warren to Crew. The hair metal guru. Never forget Charlie too.
Welcome to the Hair Metal Guru. My name is Anthony. They call me the Guru. And shit, Charlie's down here trying to advertise her OnlyFans, and she's like saying, hey, let's go get the peanut butter jar and make some extra content. Just kidding. So, all right, Patrick, my buddy Patrick is here because we need to talk about this. I feel like it's the Erik Gronwall hypocrisy. He says he can't, he joins Skid Row, does a great album with him, and then he quits because of health concerns. Well, now it seems like he's busier than ever before. Patrick, is Erik Gronwall a hypocrite?
It's hard to say, but from the beginning of his leaving Skid Row, it didn't seem to add up. Now, I'm not saying Erik Gronwall is a liar, and I'm not saying that Skid Row isn't telling the truth, but it seemed like it was such a happy marriage in heaven. They put out this I thought it was a fantastic record. I loved it. They go out on tour. It was a successful tour. Everything appears to be fine. And then Erik leaves because, well, the touring schedule's too much and he's not healthy. I know he's got a very successful YouTube channel with putting out the cover songs that he's putting out. They're getting like 1 million, 2 million hits on the Whitney Houston cover. The guy has mega talent. He put a book out also overseas. He's got a lot of things going on. I can't help but feel like there was a lot more going on behind the scenes, Guru, than we knew.
I think you're completely right. I kind of wonder if it's a case of he got asked to join Skid Row. He loves that band. He joins. They play shows. They do this album, but maybe he feels like, you know what? It wasn't exactly what I was told it was going to be. Maybe that's financially. Maybe it was other things. Maybe it was about the touring schedule. But I think he got to a point where he's like, you know what? And like you said, fuck, I got this YouTube channel. I got these other opportunities. I can be more in control. And I'm gonna take that control back, but I just wonder. I would love to hear, and I think Snake and Rachel, and I'm looking at some notes that I wrote down. Snake and Rachel have kind of said like, "Hey, we're kind of wondering too."
Yeah, there was a very interesting moment that took place a couple months after he left. Erik started putting out the YouTube videos at a much more frequent pace, and they were just blowing up. And he puts one out with his partner, who I think he wrote songs with in Heat for a while. And he said, this would have been on the next Skid Row album. And it was a kick-ass song. And about a week or two later, Snake and Rachel were in an interview and got asked about it, and they said, well, that's news to us.
Yeah,
and it's no secret. Now, this is purely a hypothesis, but it's no secret that all the way back to Skid Row's origins, who writes those songs, Guru?
Snake and Rachel.
Does anybody else really contribute to them?
The only time is, I think, Sebastian kind of strong-armed his way into getting some writing credits. And I would bet almost anything that it was a case of, let's just give him a fucking writing credit so he shuts his mouth on Slave to the Grind.
They've so much as said that was the case.
Yes.
Erik writes.
Yeah.
And he does write good songs.
Yes.
And, I can't help but feel like, Johnny Solinger had the same complaint under wraps, but was that he wanted to be a part of that process too. everybody wants to contribute when it comes time. Not a lot of people want to be Vince Neil and not contribute. And I can't help but feel that that plays into it. I'm sure he also, this was Eric's first foray into coming to America and playing in America on the regular. He made a name for himself. The fans loved him. I just don't. I think there was a lot more going on behind the scenes related to money. I think they wanted to tour a lot more because it was going well and
Right?
they were packing houses. And I don't doubt that his health plays into it. The only show that I had tickets for to go see them in Massachusetts got canceled because Eric was sick.
Yeah.
And I was pissed because I never got to go to the rescheduled show.
Yep.
But I think there was a lot more to it. And I think as time goes on, we will find, I think once we get a new singer, we'll get the story on what happened.
I don't, and please, I'm not saying that Eric is like lying about having health
Not
problems.
at all.
Like
Yeah.
like he totally has health problems, and you got to take care of your health first.
Right.
But you feel like he had the health problems before he joined Skid Row.
Right.
Feel like they would have had a plan. Okay, this is what we're going to do to accommodate you. We're really excited about bringing you in, and we understand you have health problems. You take care of your health, and then he's in the band for a short period of time and fucking bails because of health problems. But now this, um, I when you talked about like, hey, he writes songs and stuff. This is my opinion on when a older established band gets a younger, newer guy in the band. I think you're basically told, look, you you shut up, you go sing your little song, you go collect your paycheck, but when it comes to the writing and the decision making, you go over there, you sit at the little kids table, we'll sit at the big boys table and do the important shit. And we'll talk about you like you're oh so important, but this is our show. I feel like that's legitimately what happens with most, and I get it. I get it. You're fucking like, I'm 52. Like if I started something, shit, if I started a YouTube channel and had like a young kid come on, I'd be like, look, here, I'll run, I'll tell you what to do. And maybe that younger person in Eric's case, he got to a point where he's like, you know what? I have a lot more to offer than just going up on stage and singing my song and looking good. And
Yeah.
I've realized, and who knows when they signed that contract, maybe he was led to believe, and I'm not saying this is the case, maybe he was led to believe he would have more input in the songwriting, in the gangs all here. And again, that's shit that we won't know, but you kind of feel like that's a common story. I thought it was going to be this way, and when I got there, the reality was drastically different.
I think it's probably a good possibility that he was told you're to be seen, heard, but not you're not going to contribute. And
Oh,
he did, in his defense, he joined the band when the album had 99.9% been written.
yeah,
And they took ZP's vocals off and they added his. But at that point, he'd been in the band for almost 2 years, and
right.
the touring cycle was coming to an end, and it ends. And I just can't help but think that on the road, you've got some creative guys that are probably sitting in the back of the bus, going noodling away and going, well, we could do this or we could do that. And it's the creative side is right there. And the minute you open your mouth and you get told, don't,
Right.
then why would you even want to be there?
Sure, sure. And Eric's going, and yes, you get on the road for, a bunch of shows. You're the young guy, and even if the guys in Skid Row are the greatest guys in the world, even if they are, you're a you don't really relate to them,
Right.
so you probably feel kind of alone. You're playing all these shows. Most of the people that are going to the shows are dramatically older than you. You're in a foreign country, and you think it's gonna be a dream, but you get there and and maybe it starts off that way, but eventually you go, you know what? Maybe the grass wasn't greener on the other side, and maybe, and you go, I can go back, and let's say he's was making really good money in Skid Row, but sometimes you decide, you know what? A little less money and a little more control over my life and what I do and what I provide to my fans, maybe that's a solid trade-off that I'm willing to take.
The only other aspect that I can think is that Skid Row has their own band and then they have their crew that has to make money. And Erik had these opportunities, like we said earlier, the YouTube channel, the guest appearances on other albums and things like that. Maybe he also wanted a shorter touring cycle to be able to do more things. And Skid Row said, "Hey, we got mouths to feed. These people have been on the crew for 10 years. This isn't going to work."
Yep.
That's a possibility as well. But ultimately, at the end of the day, Guru, we're not getting the full story.
Yeah. And that's obvious because Snake and Rachel have hinted at it, and all we've heard from Erik is just that he had to leave because of health, but his actions now make it seem like his health was not much of a problem. And what we haven't heard was was there a conversation between Erik and the guys in Skid Row where he said, "Hey, I'm having health problems. Are you willing to alter your schedule to accommodate for those?" And whether the guys in Skid Row were like, "Of course we will." We don't know if that happened, or did Erik just, was it more of I quit and there was no discussion about it and he just made that decision. We don't have those behind the scenes conversations,
No, I
but
mean, Erik alluded a little bit to conversations about I can't do this length of a tour, but
right.
there's a lot more to it.
Sure, sure. So, well, Erik, we wish him well. The Gangs All Here was great. I think most Skid Row fans felt like they got their guy.
Yeah.
And Sebastian Bach is is in the news lately, with his comments on not fault, be kind of nice to know what Sebastian thought about Erik Gronwall, but we talked a little bit in a different video about Pete Laran and his comments about Sebastian, but most people are obviously anytime Skid Row loses a singer, it's going to immediately go back to Sebastian. So, uh, it's interesting that the tale of Skid Row never seems to end. There's never any finality. They're back. What do you think, while we're on the topic, what do you think is their next move?
Great question. That's a great question. They're bent over a barrel because they're damned if they do and they're damned if they don't. And I've watched on YouTube. There's several people who've auditioned, and they tell the story of their audition and going out to New Jersey and singing with Skid Row and going through that process. But if they pick a no name, I don't know how many, if you figure, let's say there's 100,000 Skid Row fans in the country right now that pay attention every day. Well, how many of those 100,000 got invested in Erik Gronwall and then went, "Oh shit, we're doing this again"?
Yep.
And so now it's down to 70,000 that
Yep.
care, that will buy a record or
Yep.
whatnot. I know it's not that many, but for all intents and purposes, it's just going to reduce more and more until you do the Sebastian thing.
Yeah.
And that's probably not going to happen.
Yeah.
We've talked about that a million times. It's probably not going to happen. I just I feel bad for whoever it's going to be because I think they've exhausted new singers to a point where people are just not going to hear it anymore.
Here's what I think fucking Charlie needs to go out. Yeah, because you got to go find your boyfriend. Um, I think this is the next move. They've tried the young stud. Okay. And, again, so much about being in a band is about your ability to get along and just hang out when you're not on stage. And geez, in some of the interviews that who was I just talking about? They said it's about the hang. It's about, get it's not about how great you are at everything. It's about, do we get along on stage, off stage. So you keep getting these younger guys who you are just not going to have a lot in common with. So I think they got to find an established name. Maybe not, here, I'll throw out a name. And I don't even know what, and we've emailed, and I love the 1991 album from McQueen Street. Derek
Yeah, well,
Welch is an amazing vocalist. He's older. He has some name recognition. He could probably hang out with the. So the point is, an older guy that they can get along with, that doesn't have any, isn't still going, hey, I'm young, I could get my own band, I could do my own thing and explode to stardom. Somebody who knows, hey, you know what? This is a good gig for me. I understand that Snake and Rachel are the songwriters. I'm older. I know that's past for me. I can come in, get along with the guys. We relate to each other. Hopefully, obviously it's got to be somebody who can handle that stuff vocally, which is not easy.
mhm.
That's what don't do the young buck. Find somebody who has a little bit of name recognition, who understands his place in the band, and is, let's be honest, just is happy to be in a fucking band that can go out and play shows and he can make a living at.
Yeah, they're in such a odd position because they had Solinger was kind of a young buck, and well, not a young buck, but he was inexperienced compared to them.
Yep.
That doesn't work. Then they go and get TNT guy who
Ronnie
had been
Brunell.
experienced, and that blew up quick.
Yeah.
And then they go and they get ZP, who was a recent famous,
Yep.
with Dragon Force had kind of gotten popular, and that didn't even put out a record.
Yep.
As many people have said, is it really that Sebastian's that hard, or is it that Skid Row's that difficult? And that's a $10 million question.
I've said I used to be like, fuck Sebastian, the guys in Skid Row, I'm totally on their side, and I still kind of tend to be, because Sebastian and his mouth get him into more trouble than it should. But you have to wonder, at a certain point, Skid Row's inability to keep a singer does not make them, you have to think that they hold some responsibility for
For
what's happening
sure.
in their career.
For sure.
So, all right, talked about Erik Gronwall and Skid Row. We would love to know, well, number one, what do you think Erik Gronwall is a hypocrite? Or do you understand his point of view? And what do you think Skid Row should do with their next move? Patrick, thanks for coming on to talk about your favorite and one of my favorite bands of all time, Skid Row.
Absolutely.
All right. Hey, like I said, go in the comments, like, subscribe, what the hell, ring the bell, join the channel. Costs a little bit. You get first response to comments, you get early access to some of the videos. But whatever you do, I just appreciate you being here. Until the next video comes out, my name is Anthony. They call me the Guru. Take care of yourselves.